comment on the additions to the agenda item?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay, thank you. And I'm opening that screen myself. Okay, so that was, did I hear a motion and a second?
Yes, and that's based upon an emergency finding based upon the facts stated by Pat Kasperi, our general manager, that there's no way we could have known ahead of time.
Thank you, Director Corbett. Okay, roll call.
Director Corbett,
Aye.
Director Couch,
Aye.
Director Mayo,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes.
So we'll
Do you want to
just
deal with this
9.
item at this time?
Could you repeat that, please?
Do we want to deal with this item at this time?
I had put it, right, good point. I had just by nature put it as our last item. Does our general manager have a preference for where we deal with this letter?
I do not have a preference. I also actually put it at the bottom of the agenda, though, item E9. But I don't have a preference.
Does any other director have an opinion about where we could hear that, where we would hear that item?
I don't think it requires much discussion, if any, and would be nice to get an affirmative on it and move on.
Are you suggesting we deal with it as item, well, let's see, within this, can we deal with it within the additions to the agenda section, or does it need to fall within continued and new business?
I think it would be cleaner to have it under continuing in new business.
And I'll
Okay.
pull my comment and wait for that time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I realize now that I inadvertently combined items A4 and A5 for approving the agenda. I hope that works with everyone. Item B, public hearings. These are items of a quasi-judicial or legislative nature. Public comments, sorry, let me say for those who are not looking at the agenda, that's additions to the agenda, A4, and approval of the agenda, A5. I took care of both A4 and A5 at the same time, so I apologize if that was confusing. Now on to item B, public hearings. These are items of a quasi-judicial or legislative nature. Public comments relative to these proceedings are invited. We have no public hearings scheduled tonight. On to item C, public comment and written communications. Any person may address the board at this time upon any subject not identified on this agenda, but within the jurisdiction of McKinleyville Community Services District. However, any matter that requires action will be referred to staff for a report of action at a subsequent committee or board meeting. As to matters on the agenda, an opportunity will be given to address the board when the matter is considered. Comments are limited to 3 minutes, and letters should be used for complex issues. So if there's anyone who wishes to give public comment at this time, you may do so. If you're have the ability to raise your hand, you can do so by clicking at the participants and then finding your name and raising your hand. And we will also give space for those who are simply calling in. We will unmute the phone lines when we are asking for public comment. And again, if the item you're speaking to is on the agenda, we'll also give time for public comment at that time. So have we received any written communications?
We have not received any general communications. All communications we received were for other items on the agenda.
Thank you. And is there anyone who wishes to speak during public comment time?
I'm
Okay.
unmuting the phones or asking the phone people to unmute if they would like to speak. Looks like nothing.
Moving on to item D, the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are expected to be routine and non-controversial, to be acted upon by the board of directors at one time without discussion. If any board member, staff member, or interested person requests that an item be removed from the consent calendar, it shall be removed so that it may be acted upon separately. Would anyone care for any board member care for any consent calendar item to be removed and dealt with separately?
Madam Chair, this is John Corbett. I'd move the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion. I think I heard something from Director Couch.
Yeah, I wanted to pull D4.
Okay, so we have a suggestion to pull D4. Any other items? So any member of the public wish any item to be pulled from the consent calendar? Okay, and then I'll go back to Director Corbett. Does your
There's
motion?
an absolute right to pull it, and so it would be all items of the consent calendar except D4.
Okay, so we have a,
Second.
okay, and let's see. So how do we proceed here? We don't vote at this point, do we?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, we
Yes.
do. Okay. So roll call on the consent calendar minus item D4. Thank you.
Director Corbett,
Aye.
Director Couch,
Aye.
Director Mayo,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes. Sorry, I had a bit of a memory blank about how to deal with that. So we have approved the consent calendar, and now we are going to open item D4 on page 32 of our board packet. And this is presented by our general manager, Pat Kaspari.
So item D4 is a letter of support for Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District's application for a U.S. Economic Development Administration Industrial System Rehabilitation Project grant. So Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District, who's the water wholesaler that we buy our water from, is preparing a grant application to the U.S. Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration, to rehabilitate their industrial surface water diversion system at Essex. So that's the industrial water intake and pumps that transmit the water from Essex on the MAD to Samoa, previously to the pulp mills, currently to other development on Samoa. They are turning in an EDA grant application. They needed letters of support by the end of August. So I have already written them a letter of support and submitted it to them so they could include it with their grant application.
Director Couch, would you share with us your thinking on pulling this from the consent calendar?
Well, I just wanted to, I've kind of been following this fairly closely because, you know, I am a fish aquaculture guy in my past, and I support the project, but I think this is good because we're just talking about rebuilding the raw water system. But if the aquaculture company comes back and tells us that we need to build a filtration plant for them, I don't think that would be in the public interest to spend public money on that, because that should be part of their development costs. And
Thank you.
so I support this, but I kind of want to throw that out there if it comes back in the future.
David, are you recommending a letter to them on that point, or just that it's noted for the record and we'll watch?
It's noted for the record.
Okay.
All right. So I would concur with part of what Director Couch said, but it actually, if there is a filtration system, it would actually be for the public good. There are many projects that potentially could benefit for our economy in the area. The fish deal is a standalone, as would be each of the things that come forward. On the concerns on the fish plant or the fish deal, well, that's for another discussion, and I'm somewhat on the same page with Director Couch on that. But I don't feel that the clarifier is is an unrealistic thing to think about in the future for the community. So, but that's for another discussion. I hope, though, Director Couch, that I heard you clearly that we're not going to muddle up this
Nope.
letter of recommendation with that discussion at this time.
No, I don't want to muddle it up. I just want that to be
Thank you.
for the future.
Yep.
Any other thoughts from the board on this item? We'll open this item up for public comment. Looking for hands on, you can go to the participants, find your name, click raise hand. Seeing none, April's going to unmute the phone lines. Or we ask that anyone's on the phone who wishes to comment may do so now.
There to be any comments?
So I'll bring it back to the board and entertain a motion.
I'll move, we adopt.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Corbett,
Aye.
Director Couch,
Aye.
Director Mayo,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so that takes care of our consent calendar items, and we move on now to item E, continued and new business. The first item, E1, is found on page 51. Considering professional services agreement with US Ecology to perform remediation and demolition of PCB impacted milking shed at Pelosi Ranch. I believe this is to our general manager.
Thank you, President Burke. So as the board is aware, when they moved forward with the purchase of Pelosi Ranch to provide additional irrigation area for our reclaimed water, one of the steps in the process was to conduct a phase 1 environmental site assessment. Really, the only substantive finding of the phase 1 ESA was that the former milk barn had a vacuum pump in it that was used in the milking process. And it also operated with oil that contained PCBs. Some of that oil had stained the concrete within the milking barn. Some of it had gone through the exhaust from the vacuum pumps and had impacted the soil just outside the milking barn. At the time of the purchase, we had discussed this with the board on how we would like to proceed on that. And it was decided we would take down one end of the barn and remediate that area as well as the impacted soil. So we went out and solicited bids and got 2 bids to do that work. One from US Ecology and one from North Coast Environmental Construction. Both of the companies are responsible. Both of the bids were responsive. And both companies have the necessary skills and experience and licenses to perform the work. The US Ecology bid came in at $54,405. The North Coast Environmental Construction bid came in at $66,942. The scope of work is provided in the board packet, but generally it consists of dismantling the west end of the milk barn and removing the feed silo, removing the contaminated structure and soil to an authorized site for disposal, and backfilling the excavation to ground level with soil from the surrounding areas. Staff's recommendation is that the board review the information provided, discuss, take public comment, and authorize the general manager to execute the professional services agreement with US Ecology to provide services to perform remediation and demolition of the PCB impacted milk parlor at the Pelosi Ranch, not to exceed $54,405, with a 20% contingency or $10,881 added to a total of $65,286.
Thank you. I'll turn to the directors. Do you have any questions or comments on this item? Hearing none, I'll open it to the public. Are there any questions or would anyone like to speak, public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, then this is a vote item, so I will entertain a motion.
I'll move. I would move that we approve professional services agreement with U.S. Ecology to perform remediation and demolition of PCB impacted milking shed at Pialorsi Ranch.
Second, John Corbett.
Okay. Does that motion cover what the items that we need? Okay, great, thank you. And a roll call, please.
Director Corbett,
Aye.
Director Couch,
Yes.
Director Mayo,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes, thank you. Okay, moving to item E2. Consider approval of professional service agreement with GHD to perform phase 3C of the mainline replacement and rehabilitation master plan on page 83, also presented by our general manager, Pat Kaspari.
Thank you, President Burke. So as the board is aware, we've been moving through a master planning process to replace all the water distribution and sewer collection system throughout the district. The pipes are 50+ years old, and we're planning for the complete replacement of them. We've been moving through this process in phases. Phase 3 consisted of actual physical assessment of the pipes. We went out and grabbed some samples of the asbestos and ductile iron pipe. The ductile iron pipes are like the line from Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District that crosses under the Mad River and provides water to our Ramey pump station, is in great shape. No issues there. We did find in our sampling, though, that the AC, the asbestos cement pipe of 6-inch diameter and smaller, which makes up some of our water system and some of our sewer system, actually had lost a lot of its strength, in up to 50% of its strength in certain areas. So that had kind of changed our focus on where we were going to focus on replacing the pipe and which pipe we were going to place first. We now are going to move forward with phase 3C to reassess, based on those findings, where we want to replace the pipe first and do a risk assessment of which pipes are less important, which pipes are more important if they break, how many people will lose service, how much potential impacts could we have for dumping sewage into a creek or something like that. So that's the scope of phase 3C, is to reassess the risk and come up with a new plan and schedule for pipe replacement. We think coming out of phase 3C, we will have our final schedule and replacements map showing, okay, we're going to replace these pipes this year or this 5-year period, then we'll move to these pipes and replace them in the next 5-year period, etc. So we'll have a complete schedule for replacing everything. One of the other things that we're also adding to this phase is there's been a question of whether we should have all of this pipe replaced, the physical construction done by engineers and contractors. So we would hire this out to engineers to draw up the plans for the replacement of a particular section and go out to bid and have a contractor then go in and do the construction. There are definite sections of the system where I absolutely would want to have that done. I don't want to be having the district replace the pipes down Central Avenue. I'd much rather have a contractor doing that work. However, I think there are areas of the system where our crews could replace the pipes. So we've asked GHD to also look at, is it cost effective for the district to hire staff and likely buy an excavator, likely buy another dump truck, and have us do that work Or is it more cost effective just to hire an engineer to draw up plans and bid documents and go out to bid and hire a contractor to do that work? So we've asked them to do a detailed analysis of that as well. So that in general is the scope of work for phase 3C. And we would do this work under an existing contract with GHD. And staff recommends the board review the information provided, discuss, take public comment, and authorize the general manager to execute the agreement to the existing professional services agreement with GHD to provide services to perform phase 3 of the mainline replacement and rehabilitation master plan, not to exceed $71,500 with a 10% contingency of $7,150, totaling $78,650.
Thank you. Turn to the directors and see if there's comments or questions on this item. I just want to say it's, it's great to have this work moving forward. And then to have a finding that lets us pivot how the work is going to play out across the community and make sure that we're taking care of the highest risk pipes that we can first. So, I'm glad that the work that we have being done is proving fruitful. I look forward to getting the work underway.
This is
So
John.
go ahead.
Heard of before having an engineer study whether it pays to do it in-house or out of house. I really like that approach. And this is overall a great project.
Thank you. Anything more from our general manager?
I do not. And just one other point of scheduling though too. So we think we'll have this work done here early part of 2021. And I think we will then be going out to final construction probably summer 2022. Maybe it'll roll over to 2023, but we're going to be moving into construction fairly soon on this stuff.
I'll turn to public comment at this time, and if anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. And I'm not seeing any hands.
Hey,
or hearing
Madam Chair,
any.
this is
Oh.
John Corbett. I'll move we adopt per staff. And I just think the fact that districts approaching preventive maintenance this fashion is just exemplary. Very happy.
So we have a motion and a second from Director Mayo. A roll call vote, please.
Director Corbett,
Aye.
Director Couch,
Aye.
Director Mayo,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes. Moving on to item E3 on page 91 of the board packet. Consider approval of a temporary 50% reduction in facility use fees for the McKinleyville Senior Center at Azalea Hall. And for this item, we turn to our Recreation Director, Leslie Frisbee.
So the McKinleyville Senior Center has requested a 50% reduction in facility fees due to the closure of the Senior Center and Azalea Hall because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The McKinleyville Senior Center has paid fees in full through June of 2020, and if granted, the 50% reduction would be retroactive to April of 2020, as that was the first full month for which the McKinleyville Senior Center was not able to use Azalea Hall. The Senior Center's current facility use agreement states a monthly fee of $572 to cover utilities and janitorial supplies. 50% of that fee is $286. If the fee reduction is approved, the amounts paid for April, May, and June in excess of $286 will go toward the payments for July, August, and September. The fee reduction will only be in effect while the senior center is unable to meet and use Azalea Hall for programs and services due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the county public health department's restrictions on social gatherings. An amendment to the agreement can be reviewed in attachment 1. The changes to be executed by the amendment are as follows, shown in track changes. McKinleyville Senior Center shall pay to the district an amount agreed upon by both parties of $286 per month so long as the facility is closed for use by the community due to the social restrictions imposed by the state of California and the county of Humboldt as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The fees paid will be for utilities and janitorial supplies as provided in Section 4 that are necessary for ongoing maintenance of the facility, even while it is not in use and while the McKinleyville Senior Center has equipment and other items remaining within the facility. Upon recension of the state and county COVID meeting restrictions, the monthly usage fee will return to the agreed upon $572 per month. The utility and janitorial supplies charge may be adjusted by the district on an annual basis in consultation with the McKinleyville Senior Center. Staff recommends that the board review the information provided, take public comment, and approve a temporary 50% reduction in facility use fees for the McKinleyville Senior Center.
Thank you. Any questions or comment from the board?
So I would move to approve this item subject to public comment and board comment. I think it's wholly warranted at this time.
Thank you. There's a motion
I'll second.
and second. Any other comment from the board? There we go. And I see we do have a hand in the audience. Craig Orsini.
Thank you, President Burke. Yeah, my only question would be to Leslie is, so the 50% reduction is going to well cover the costs that we would be incurring related to the seniors. I'm going to make that assumption.
Yes, the reduction in, so the utility costs and janitorial supplies have been reduced by 33% since the closing of the facility, and supply costs have been reduced by 24% since the closing of the facility. So their monthly rent is typically 1/3 of the total cost. So based on the reduction in usage and the reduction in our own costs, their 50% will continue to cover it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment? If you're on the phone, please unmute yourself. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table, so I'll call for roll call.
Director Corbett,
Yes.
Director Couch,
Yes.
Director Mayo,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes. Moving on to item E4. This is one I know I've been really excited to hear more about at the board level. And it is to hear the BMX track development proposal presentation. It's on page 95 of your board packet. And it is being presented by Leslie Frisbee, our recreation director, as well as Jason and Wendy Orlandi and Charlie Caldwell of Humboldt Skate Park Collective. Welcome, everybody.
So Wendy and Jason
Thanks,
Orlandi approached the district in July of 2019 to discuss the possibility of getting a BMX track developed in McKinleyville. And since then, the Orlandis have met regularly with the Recreation Advisory Committee and staff and have taken steps to create a concept design for a track at the Washington Avenue and School Road property, get public input through a public input meeting and surveys, and determine county requirements for development of the property. In December of 2019, approximately 25 community residents participated in a public input meeting. The majority of those present were residents within the neighborhoods adjacent to the proposed track. And while this project is driven by community resident interest, the Humboldt Skate Park Collective has agreed to serve as the nonprofit organization representing the project, and as such will serve as fiscal agent for the purposes of fundraising and grant writing. Before I turn this over for the presentation by the Orlandis and Mr. Caldwell, staff recommends that the board hear the presentation, review the information provided, air questions, take public comment, and then provide some feedback to staff and the presenters regarding what the board needs and wants in order to support a future request for a right of entry agreement between MCSD and the Humboldt Skate Park Collective for the Washington Avenue and School Road district-owned property for the purpose of developing a BMX track. And with that, I will give it to Jason and Wendy, who will present a presentation, PowerPoint.
All right. Hey, thanks to Leslie and everybody on the RAC committee for the last year, kind of helping us with this vision here. I'm a registered nurse, and quick background, I came across this when I was doing a public health presentation or a paper that I was writing, and just kind of looking at what McKinneyville is offering, you know, for kids to get them out and be active and healthy and reduce obesity and just generally improve their health status. And you know, it was sitting at a RAC committee meeting, and they were talking about potentially putting in a pump track. And so part of this presentation will kind of talk about the difference between a racetrack and a pump track. And the first couple slides here were actually put together by my son, who was in 7th grade. Some of these slides are the presentation that we gave at Zelia Hall when we did the public outreach forum. So April, would you mind switching to the next slide? So real quick, the difference between a pump track and a BMX track. So the pump track is this image that's on the left. It's very similar to what you might think of as like a skate park, where people can just kind of show up and there's some features and some paved areas or dirt areas for them just to kind of ride on. It's kind of maybe 1 or 2 people at a time, so to speak. And it's, you know, once you generate the money and put it there, it's great for the community. A BMX track, on the other hand, same kind of concept, great for the community, get people out there multiple times a week, but it's more, you have races and people pay money to be members of this national sanctioning body. There's multiple events throughout the week, and it actually can help generate some revenue to help maintain the park and its surroundings. Both are excellent options for a community to give something for people of all ages to get out and be active. Me and my family have been traveling up and down the West Coast for many years, going to racetracks of all sizes, local races to national level races. And so when I heard that they were talking about maybe a pump track, I kind of raised my hand and said, hey, what about a BMX track? So April, could you switch to the next slide? And so we were kind of thinking about the concept of just a small basic track. Some counties and cities have really in-depth tracks that are multi-million-dollar facilities that have world-class athletes. Some smaller areas, this picture is a track up outside of Salem. Nice track out in the woods, still close to town. We actually have gone to races here many times. And so it gets people from the local community out to the track, but you can also get people coming in from outside to come to events that you hold. People come stay at the hotels, you know, they eat at the restaurants, go to our stores, and then, you know, spend a good day at the track. And we have made many friends up and down the West Coast going to the many tracks that there are, and people love to potentially get away from the Central Valley heat, come over to the coast this time of year. So yeah, and like the screen shot says, that, you know, it's a local track can support people that are just getting out, just learning how to ride a bike, and or people that are actually, you know, participating at a state and regional level. And yeah, so next slide, please. And so the Beginner League, this is kind of what I was touching on a second ago. The gentleman in the left-hand image Donnie Robinson, he is a native of Napa, California, and he actually won the bronze medal in the 2008 Olympic BMX race that they had. And he's actually developed a program that he's spread to tracks all over the country, just called, it's the Beginner League. It's to get kids who have no racing experience, but have a bike, get them a helmet, and just get them out onto the track and kind of learn about riding on a track with other people. This reminds me very similar to almost what we have locally with, like, I've coached soccer for locally Matter View Soccer League for 10 years. This is exactly the same thing. We get the little ones out there and the older ones that maybe have never seen this sport, get them out on the track, they're active. And if they want to, then on a different day of the week when we actually have races, they're more than welcome to come race. But this is just an introductory, they pay a fee, get out on the track. I think it's like an 8 to 10 week program and multiple programs throughout the year. So again, getting kids out, helping generate some money for the track. And yeah. And next slide, please. So the STEM, maybe my wife Wendy would like to speak on this one. She is a superintendent at a local elementary school.
So the USA BMX, they have a lot of resources for connecting BMX with school STEM projects. So there's things in there that kids can help design tracks. They can even get them posted on the USA BMX site. There's a lot of stuff about doing with gearing. There's stuff about traveling to different tracks. You can follow your favorite. You can pick somebody and follow them through different races. Whether it's some of the people that my kids really like, they travel the world. And so they like to, map out on the map and the world map where they're traveling to go to all these races. And so there's a lot of connections to school that you can do. And there's some scholarships for schools. And there's also connections like for if you do so much reading that you can win prizes through USA BMX. And if you have enough participation with the school, you can even win a Haro bike.
Wendy, would you explain the acronym for those who aren't up on school acronyms? STEM.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's science, technology, engineering, and math is the STEM. So connecting those to BMX, to racing.
Thank
so
you.
there'll be different lessons in those realms. Thank you.
Next slide. So now on to this is a rendering that we kind of came up with. My good friend Devin Medrug, he developed this. And we've had a couple different phases of this, and it's just kind of an idea of what could potentially be there at the property on School Road. I know that there have been issues. The people on Washington Avenue didn't necessarily want an entrance right there. And I don't even think, I'm pretty sure we're not even allowed to have an entrance to the area on that side. It would all have to be off School Road. So with the mini drawings and how busy we all are right now, Devin wasn't actually able to draw up one more with that, that access route closed off. But on the left side of the property, there's a lot of open spaces. And one thing we had talked about too, is to like have a playground or have some other things to use on this property and a BMX track. I know that a lot of times we go to races and maybe, you have the 2-year-old or the 3-year-old that's not quite on a bike yet, loves watching the bigger siblings, but maybe just wants to go hang out at the playground, or there's maybe going to be other people in the neighborhood that just stop on by to use the playground. So we were trying to get some ideas from some of the local residents on other things they would like to see at this site as well, with some of the open spaces too. So it's not just, we're definitely all for the BMX track, but also some other things to potentially put in there as well, just to, like I said, to get people out and being active. Yeah. So, and next slide, please, April. And so the next couple slides, I reached out to USA BMX. They're the nationally sanctioning body and have great outreach. They provided me with all kinds of different spreadsheets and informative stuff on, how much it would cost to build, you know, an Olympic-sized track versus how much it might cost just to build a smaller track in a small community park. So these all are just kind of these aren't, how would I put it? I didn't actually go out and do the exact numbers and get exact quotes from people.
It's an estimate.
Yeah, just some estimates for everyone to kind of look over. And I know some of the costs that would be on here. Do you want to talk? Wendy actually was able to reach out to Hooven Construction.
Yeah, I talked to Tim Hooven, and he had mentioned that he actually had done a lot of work for the Hiller complex and said he would be interested in helping out with this project as well. And so he was interested in doing some of the management and using the heavy equipment for clearing that out. So that that would save a lot of money. I mean, that's a lot. That's the site preparation and the earthwork. That would be huge. So I was very excited and happy that he was so willing and just, okay. It's very promising.
And another huge cost of building a BMX track, it's dirt. And so with the grading of this property, when Devin was out kind of doing an initial little survey out there, kind of looking around, the amount of dirt that would have to be cleared to get the grading right would actually be a suffice amount of dirt to actually just use for the track itself. So we wouldn't have to then pay a whole bunch more money to haul in dirt to you know, a location to build a track. It's already there on site, so to speak. So that was yet another kind of a win-win there. You know, grade the thing down, the dirt's already sitting there. We don't have to pay to move dirt out, and the dirt's right
And
there.
hopefully it would make permitting easier because you're using the dirt that's already there,
Yeah.
not having to do soil samples of bringing in soil from somewhere else.
All right, April, next slide, please. So this is something that Devin kind of made up a while back. Obviously, the time frame is pretty arbitrary, just kind of threw some dates in, but you know, just kind of wanting to show like there are particular, you know, phases of this and just kind of giving a timeline of how things might go along. Obviously, I forget when the gentleman at the RAC committee said, you know, 14 days to get something permitted and done, and it might, that's pretty wishful thinking, but you know, we're trying to just, you know, show that we're, you know, thinking in this mind frame, and at the same time having someone like Mr. Hooven who was potentially, he was kind of willing to step in with this phase and helping the development of the track was definitely, we're very grateful for that. You know, once a track is in, with our experience in working with our friends, the running of the track is a little bit more of our forte per se, but yeah, it's this timeline, about halfway down, it starts talking about framing and pouring slabs and all that kind of stuff. You know, that could be maybe future projects on down the line, but essentially just getting the property developed and a track built and getting kids out there and getting a little revenue coming in is kind of our, you know, early
Building
goals.
the minimal.
Yeah, just starting small. We don't want to, you know, shoot for the moon, even though this is obviously going to be a fairly good sized project. But yeah, and, next slide, please. And so this is one of the Excel spreadsheets, just a calculator, you know, monthly calculator to figure out, you know, how much income you're going to have and expenses.
Pre-COVID estimation.
Yeah, this is before everything kind of got shut down there a little bit. But when I start plugging in numbers into, you know, usually you're sanctioned to have X amount of races per month and X amount of practices, and they all generate a little money, each of them. I was actually kind of modest with the amount of, usually most tracks will have three race events a week. And so, you know, that'd be like 12 a month. Yeah, it's like 2 to 3. I think, you know, I tried to say, oh, we're only going to do maybe 6 just to get out the gate. Cause I didn't want to overinflate the numbers here, but just, you know, this would be kind of our flow sheet that we would use on a monthly basis and, you know, provide to the people from the Skate Park Collective, just oversight kind of how we're doing financially, and the MCSD as well. And then just, there's some expenses. The ABA is the American Bicycle Association, now known as USA BMX. They do have some monthly fees for sanctioning, which also covers insurance during the races for the riders. And just to kind of show that, we could potentially be bringing in a little bit of money each month to help pay for some of the maintenance in and around the park, and just to kind of put money aside for future, just upkeep and improvements on the track. So, all right. April, next slide, please. Yeah, and so then kind of just back to this one, just kind of leave this on the screen. And then if anybody has questions for us, try and do our best to answer them. Like the people at the RAC community have heard us say many times, some of this development of a property is new to us for sure. So we'll try and answer things as best we can if anybody has any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Jason and Wendy, for your presentation. And it's great to see your vision. Thanks for leading us through that. I'm going to first go to our board and see if the board has questions or comments. Okay. I have a few questions myself. So one, I heard you talking about fee for program, and then I also heard the difference between a pump track and a BMX track being like the pump track is something you can kind of show up to like a skate park, but the BMX track, it tends to be more of a fee for service. Can you talk a little bit more about the availability of this facility for people who would just like to walk up or not a part of a class or a race?
So yeah, no, that's actually a really great question. And I would actually bring up the town of Medford. Their track in Medford is open at all times. You can go there any time of the week if you want. It's not fenced off. You can go up and ride anytime you want. Certain times of the week, they'll, have the events where you had to be, a member of USA BMX to, participate in the actual racing. But other than that, yeah, you have to have safety gear. But other than that, you can go there any other time of the week and just go ride it. And it's right next to the skate park in Medford. So, there'll be, I guess I would probably say it's kind of up to what we would want it to be. If we want to have it open for everybody, it's not, it's not a problem to have it open. It's probably, potentially a little bit more track upkeep because, inevitably people will go out, probably have a little bit more usage, which means a little bit more maintenance, but it doesn't have to be closed all the time. I would not want it to be, only people that can pay can ride. I wouldn't want to put that out there. You could have it like a skate park where it has a fence around it, and on days that it's wet and unsafe to ride or at dark, you could just close the fence and, in the morning it gets opened up, anybody that wants to come in. So there's definitely, it's definitely that possibility.
There's positives and concerns. I mean, if you have it open all the time, you could get a potential for more vandalism, but that's hard to know because you might get that anyway, even if it's fenced off, people jump the fence. And as far as, I don't know with the liability issues, what Medford does, if it's open all the time, then it's not covered by USA BMX sanction. The races, the riders are covered, and there's people there to monitor that all the kids have full face helmets, that their elbows are covered, that their legs are covered, that their bikes are safe, as opposed to, I've been at Medford when the race isn't there and there's a kid in his shorts with no shirt and, a half head bouncing sideways, so that is it. But the big positive is it's a lot of fun. Like, it's one of my favorite tracks to go to because my kids will want to keep riding when racing's over. Or my youngest, that's really shy and doesn't want to race, wants to be there when nobody else is there. So we go there early in the morning whenever I'm there. And she goes and rides by herself, around the track with just her brother and sister to get comfortable.
And we've been there when just, the random people happen to be riding by on a little family bike ride, and one of the kids just wants to go try it. And then you got a kid and a dad on a mountain bike who've, they're just out there having fun. They might be there for 10 minutes and then, on they go with the rest of their morning bike ride. So, yeah.
So thanks for bringing up the insurance, Wendy. And so it sounds like insurance during classes and races, we could be covered through this BMX group. Is there a group that would be convening those races locally? That would,
Yeah. We've already talked to some of our friends that are pretty active in BMX riding to have, like a little board of directors, so to speak,
Yeah.
to have,
We
and
do open meetings every month.
Mhm.
We have to have a track operator that has to go through training through USA BMX. And then you have to have a certain number of volunteers because you have a volunteer at every corner.
yeah, so like on this track, there's 3 turns. You would have to have one adult or one non-rider in every corner just to monitor in case someone goes down and this is during races. But no, it's definitely,
They're all USA BMX safety.
yeah, we would have our own little board of
precautions.
directors for the track for events and actively engage parents to be volunteers and help us kind of run everything. It's definitely volunteer run.
Yes.
and I think my last question is, it's nice to know that you've visited a lot of tracks in maybe the region or, along the coast or, wherever you've been visiting tracks. What's your thought on a track like this being located in a predominantly, residential area versus like your ideal location for a BMX track?
Well, I guess my quick thought would be, when you have something like this on a main thoroughfare, you're going to have a lot of kids see this new track that's right there. It gets, it's in a highly visible spot.
Grants Pass, that they get a new rider every week just by kids that are going by it.
They're going,
Versus tracks that are not visible, you don't get new riders. And I can't remember the average life of a BMX rider that stays with the sport. The most of them will ride 3 to 5 years and then they move on to something else. There's people like Jason who do it for their whole life, but most people go 3 to 5 years. So you really need new riders in the sport to keep it going, and you need new parent volunteers to really keep it going. So to be out of sight is a real challenge.
that was one hard thing that the track that was at Redwood Acres had before it got taken down. Was it'd been there for, I rode there when I was a young teenager, and people didn't even know where it was at. People would go to the Redwood Acres Fair and still didn't know where because it was on the backside, plenty of space, but at the same time, you just didn't get that visibility. Whereas our friends that run the track in Grants Pass were telling us, kids are going grocery shopping with their parents and they drive by the track, and the next thing you know, they're out there trying it out the next week, taking their bike out because it's on a main road going right downtown.
Thank you. Again, just checking with the board members. Anyone have comment or question before I open it to the public?
I had a comment that I just wanted Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the RAC committee voted to support this. So they don't do that too often.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We've appreciated all your help and guidance and suggestions over the last year.
So turning to public comment, is there anyone who wishes to give public comment on this item? I don't see any hands raised, and if you're on the phone, please go ahead.
Yes, there was
Oh.
one hand raised. Jim, I believe it was.
Yes. Hello.
Go ahead, Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hi. My wife and I are both educators, so we, of course, you want to turn this off because we're getting feedback. We like the STEM aspect, I suppose, of the BMX track. We came back to California from the Grants Pass area, and I don't think I've ever gone by that track where I actually saw it being used. But it's not residential. And we happen to be the first house right next to the property on Dutchess Road. So in some ways, we might be the property that could be impacted the most in terms of what goes on in the park. And actually having the park, the BMX development to occur would be helpful in the sense that it would get rid of a lot of the invasive plants that are growing there and not being cut back that migrate to our property, as well as gophers. If you could asphalt the entire thing, that wouldn't be something we would be objecting. All right, so anyway, we're obviously concerned about what is actually located on the site next to our property. And as we see it from this diagram, there is some sort of trees, or I would assume shrubs, that would be planted that would be next to the fence of our property. And next to that is a sidewalk. If you're familiar with that area that goes to Dutchess Road, you know a lot of people cut across where that the playground area is identified. They don't go at a right angle, but they go sort of diagonally across and then come out on our sidewalk and then proceed up Oakdale from Dutchess Road. And so we're kind of concerned in terms of what kind of barrier there might be there, and what would be put into the playground. Would there be playground structures? Would it just be a grass area? And whose responsibility would that be? Would that be the district's, or would that be the people who are developing the track itself? That's one concern. The other thing is I know there was some talk about working in stages and so on. I think we would be really happy, of course, if they were able to get funding at 100% and they could do everything at the same time, because there's obviously going to be a lot of dust and dirt and so on that's going to be generated from excavating and moving that dirt around. And there are quite a few trees in there, and I assume that all of those trees are going to have to be removed. So those are some of the kinds of things that we have, I suppose, as concerns that we would hope could be addressed before the project would totally be approved and start happening. And
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here, Jim, and expressing those concerns. And, you know, I am interested to hear maybe from Leslie or from Pat on the sort of joint responsibilities, if you have some thoughts to give on the district versus a BMX group.
So the way I imagined it, and we haven't really talked about it in depth, but what I would imagine that in the track, I would call them the track committee or track board, would be responsible for the maintenance of the track, and if there was in the park area would become the MCSC's responsibility. So I would endeavor to find a grant to put in a playground, and then that would be something that MCSC would maintain, and then the track would be part of the BMX maintenance responsibilities. But like I said, I think that would come late, like, you know, prior to approval of the project, there would be an agreement written up outlining all of the specific responsibilities and roles of each agency.
Have we considered as a district offering, you know, our own programs on the track, or is that more for a BMX group to operate?
I would imagine just like with the skate park, the way we've talked with Charlie at the Skate Park Collective, doing collaborative camps of some kind, if that was what we would talk about, what could be possible. that's what I imagine. Like I said, we're at an early stage.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, I do see Greg Orsini has his hand up. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, President Burke. Yeah, a couple of things to bring up would be, of course, we would have to. I believe the property would have to be rezoned. I believe it's zoned residential now, but it might be zoned public. But so that would be a question I would have. Things that would need to be worked out, and maybe in some sort of giving things for the board to think about related to, because I know that this is what's they're basically coming to the board for guidance on what the board would need to see before we could do a right of entry agreement, and also environmental related to wetland delineations and things like that are things I think that would be very important for the board to vet before we commit to offering the property or tying the property up, which is going to be necessary, of course, for them to be able to get any sort of grant funding, which I completely understand. I personally think this is a great use of that property. It's something we don't have in McKinleyville, and I think it's in a really good location for that. Though, of course, I don't live next door to it, so there is that. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And in line with that, what are the types of things we would need to see before entertaining a right of entry agreement? That would be to Leslie or Pat Kaspari.
Leslie, are you waiting for me to jump in?
Yes, I am.
I can jump in. Yeah, I think they have put together a lot of the things. Some of my concerns are, like Greg said, okay, environmental stuff. We are going to have to do, CEQA on this project too when we get to that point. So we're going to have to do all the environmental investigations. And so we're going to have to figure out who's paying for that stuff as well. One of my concerns too is the schedule for construction and having the construction fees in place, or not necessarily completely in place, but what the plan is, because we don't want to tie up the property and then have it sit there for years while we're trying to get construction stuff together. I think we do have to come to an agreement on the insurance stuff too. Our JPIA policy will cover, just public use of our parks, etc. However, the races and stuff, it sounds like, the BMX Association would cover those. So, getting that stuff all laid out would be a very good thing. I think we should draft up, and I think the district should take the lead on what, an agreement would look like, and draft something up and get it to them for their review and the RAC committee's review. I don't know, Leslie, what am I missing?
I can't think of what you're missing. I think you kind of covered it. In conjunction with preparation for this presentation, we reviewed, Charlie and Jason and Wendy and I reviewed the existing right of entry agreement with the skate park collective for the skate park property. And Charlie he was really helpful in making some edits that could be specific to a BMX right of entry agreement for that property. And I just want to say, in terms of like having 100% of the funds ready at the time of approving a right of entry agreement, we put a timeline on the skate park collective so that even though they didn't have the 100% of the funding at the time, there was a timeline that they knew if they couldn't get it together and start construction by a specific time, then we had a right to take that agreement back. Am I getting that right, Charlie?
Yes, we had a 3.5-year window that we're coming up on in 2021.
So I imagine doing it, like addressing it very similarly to the way we've addressed it with the skate park project.
And I think with the cost estimating, I think I heard that was a draft, and it would
It's
be
a rough estimate.
a rough estimate. So it'd be good to get a real, engineer's estimate of what this is going to cost. Even if you're going to do it with volunteer labor, we've got to have, I think, real costs to know how feasible the effort is.
Part of being able to invest in the engineering to get those costs is the reason we want the right of entry, is so that we can actually move forward with going through that process.
Fair enough.
I had a comment.
Okay.
So I saw on the list of things was a public bathroom. So it wasn't very fleshed out. That could cost more than the track. So I just want to make sure that we discuss that with everything else.
So my understanding, a lot of the tracks right now would use the portable systems on race days and stuff. And I know that piece of property doesn't have any of the plumbing or anything in for a public restroom. So that would be something we wouldn't look at necessarily with the track, but maybe down the road, working with MCSD to get something that's a more stable facility with the park once it's established.
Okay.
And Jim, are you trying to get our attention?
It's the other half. We've only been there a little over a year and everyone's told us there's a fault there. So I'm assuming, since there's no discussion of the fault, that there's no problem with all the building that will be there. Am I correct? I mean, I'm asking because I don't know the rules.
That would be an item I imagine would be explored through CEQA. But I don't have further. Anyone else have, our general manager have any information there?
Yeah, I assume you're talking about an earthquake fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's earthquake faults through everywhere here, up here. So it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay.
One of the other things is, I think that we should sit down with the neighbors, not only you guys, but flesh out, okay, what does the screening vegetation look like? What will access look like through that area, et cetera, and get yours as well as the other neighbors' inputs on.
Great.
Yeah, I would love to do it with the committee so we don't have to take meeting time. And I mean, that would be a win-win, I think, for all of us.
Agreed.
I was going to say too.
Yeah, we would love to. So we would love to meet with everybody and make this
Right.
so that everybody had their voices are all heard and we can have something that works for everybody. That's definitely a win-win for all involved.
And secretly, after meeting you at the meeting, I have a plan to try to rope you into helping us. As another teacher, I enjoyed chatting with you at the meeting. I have dreams that I might have you helping me with registration.
So we are going to move to close this item. So I think we've given you some good feedback on the types of things we'd be looking for and design ideas, and it's great to have the neighbors here. Just real quick, anything from our recreation director or general manager before we move on to the next
I think
item?
Couch had something he wanted to add.
Well, I was just going to mention that when we bought the property, we were aware of the fault and we kind of got a good deal on it because of the fault, and having something like a track that's not a building would be an ideal use of it because of the fault.
Jason and Wendy for their efforts and their patience and diligence in trying to move this project forward. I also want to thank Charlie for all of his help and assistance and the support of the Skate Park Collective, and the board and our general manager for all of the wonderful input. We'll be back.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm going to look here. I'm guessing, and I want to test the audience here, is if anyone is here for item E5 or E6, that's the annual review of our strategic plan is E5, and E6 is discussion about digital meeting guidelines. I could move those items after the E7, E8, E9, E7 being the ISMND for the Mad River project, E8, the solar panels and microgrid, and E9, the letter that we discussed at the beginning of the meeting. So again, my question is to the audience, and I would be doing this for you, you're here sitting through the meeting with us, I would move item E5 and E6 unless there are people here who are looking to provide comment on those items. So show of hands if you are here for the strategic plan and digital meeting guidelines. Or please speak up if you're on the phone. Okay, so I am not seeing anyone who is here specifically for item E5 or E6. And so I am going to ask that we move item E5 and E6 after item E9, which is the item we added considering the letter for the community forest.
Okay, so moving on to item E7 then.
Moving on to item E7. And before we turn to this item, to let the community know, so I am going to be recusing myself on this item. So I am a director with the Community Services District, and I work for California Trout, who is the nonprofit involved in this project. While working for a nonprofit, there is no conflict of interest, but on any item related to this project, I have recused myself from voting. And so to do that, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera and turn off my audio. And I'm looking to our Vice President, Director Mayo, who I see a black screen right now, but I'm hoping to see him and his audio. There we go.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I don't see you. But with that, and I'll just pause for a second in case there's anything that I'm missing. But with that, I am going to turn off my audio and my visual and recuse myself from this item.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Mary. Would our general manager give us a short presentation on this item, please?
Okay. I just wanted to point out that Darren Miro from CalTrout is on the phone with us, and if there are technical questions that come up, he can likely address them. But this is to discuss and consider approval of Resolution 2020-22, adopting the Mitigative Negative Declaration and the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program for the Mad River Floodplain and Public Access Enhancement Project, and approving the project based on approval of the final construction funding. As the board is aware, after the purchase of the Pelosi property, the district has sufficient land now to dispose of our reclaimed water through irrigation. Previously, some of the reclaimed water was discharged to percolation ponds that were located on the shores of the Mad River, and the water would percolate through those ponds. With taking those ponds out of service, we need to abandon those ponds. So we could either go out there and just fill them in with dirt and walk away from them, or we could implement this project. When we were initially looking at this project, Director Orsini at the time had talked to California Fish and Wildlife about the potential for these ponds to be reconnected to the river and add off-stream habitat for aquatic species. So we developed that idea, and CalTrout came in and put together grant funding to do the initial design and permitting of an off-stream channel for the ponds. The project has 4 main objectives. One, the permanent removal of the wastewater infiltration ponds and the piping infrastructure, as well as the surrounding perimeter levee from the floodplain, thereby reestablishing over 4 acres of riparian floodplain habitat. Number 2, to align the habitat restoration objectives specifically for overwintering juvenile coho salmon with MCSD's plan for decommissioning the percolation ponds. Number 3, enhance the public access amenities at a desirable coastal access location. And number 4, inform long-term property management decisions through a biofiltration study, evaluating reclaimed wastewater irrigation and different vegetation uptake types. This project has been in front of the board on numerous occasions, so I am going to kind of skip through the background, but if people, including people of the public, want more detail on how many wetlands we're putting in, how much length of channel, etc., we can answer those questions. So I'm going to jump right to the CEQA process. An initial study in a mitigated negative deck was prepared detailing the project components and the potential environmental impacts as required by the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. The ISMND was circulated and filed with the State Clearinghouse along with a notice of completion on March 16th, 2020. A notice of intent to adopt was published in the Mad River Union on April 1st, 2020. And only one comment was received on the circulated document, and that was from the State Lands Commission. And they were asking for additional information to determine whether a state lands lease was required for this project. Subsequently, it was determined that a lease was required, and CalTrout put together the lease document and then submitted it to the state lands. Subsequent to all those comments and after the closure of the public comment period, we have been getting additional public comments. Most of the comments were focused on impacts to people at the School Road and Ocean Avenue and Verwer Avenue, which is where the parking and trails would start for this project on the bluff. One sample comment, which is similar to others, was received from Beryl Feldman and states in part, while I applaud a wheelchair accessible trail and parking for handicapped people as part of the School Road Trail, my partner, neighbors, and I are fearful that the trail project will bring about increased vehicular traffic on our 1-block long, dead-end, privately owned and maintained dirt road just west of Ocean Avenue. Currently, we see close to 20 cars daily driving too fast on our road and using it as a turnaround for people who either ignore or fail to notice the large yellow dead end and no turnaround signs at the northwest corner of School and Ocean. We request some creative mitigation to traffic and anticipated parking problems resulting from the project. So subsequent to these comments and CalTrout and I meeting with the neighbors, we've talked to Humboldt County Public Works. And Humboldt County Public Works is currently working on adding a turnaround at the end of School Road before Verwer and narrowing the area past School where it does go on to Verwer to cut down any traffic, not only from this project, from any project going on Verwer. So there'd be a turnaround put at the end of School Road. Public Works is currently looking at that and developing plans, and we'll continue to work with them and talking to the community about implementing that. CEQA also requires that when adopting a mitigated negative declaration, the lead agency shall also adopt a program for reporting on or monitoring the changes which it has either required in the project or made a condition of approval to mitigate or avoid significant environmental effects. Towards that end, we have prepared a mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, and it's included as attachment A to the board packet. The MMRP details the mitigation measures contained in the mitigated neg deck and outlines and summarizes how the measures will be monitored, who is responsible for performing the monitoring, and the necessary reporting requirements. The board will need to adopt the MMRP as part of the CEQA process. As far as fiscal analysis, project has been designed and will be constructed largely through public grant funds, largely obtained and administered by Caltrout. Caltrout secured grant fundings in the amount of $328,762 for the design and planning grants, and continues to take the lead on pursuing construction grant funding. The district also obtained one grant, a Habitat Conservation Fund grant in the amount of $40,000 that went towards supporting some of the design with the balance to be used for construction. Caltrout is in the process of submitting grant applications for the final design and construction. And although they haven't been finalized, it looks like they are going to be successful. There is a table included in the board packet that outlines all the existing grant funding, the amount spent on the planning and design, and the estimated construction grant funding. Of the estimated $1,989,150 design, permitting, and construction costs, the district is expected to match only $8,000 or 0.4%, and the rest is grant or in-kind funding from Caltrout or other stakeholders. The district fiscal year 2020-2021 budget included $200,000 for this project based off the estimated $170,000 required to just fill in the ponds. So with that, CEQA requires that the board adopt the mitigated negative declaration for the project, adopt the mitigation, monitoring, and reporting plan for the project, and approve the project. The district is then required to file a notice of determination with the county recorder's office within 5 working days of the decision to approve a project. All of these items are addressed in attachment 7, resolution 2020-22. An approval of the resolution will enact the required adoptions and approvals and direct the general manager to file the notice of determination. So staff recommends the board review this information, discuss, take public comment, and approve resolution 2020-22, which adopts the mitigated negative declaration and the mitigated monitoring reporting program, and approves the Mad River floodplain and public access enhancement project based on board approval of the final construction funding. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Director Mayo.
Thank you, General Manager. And thank you for that report. Addressed a few issues that had come up, and I'm glad we're clear on those. Is there any comments from the board members?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman, John Corbett here. I had concerns on the agenda notice and on the having a clarified project concept approval subject to the construction cost. Staff have totally and positively responded to those comments, and so I'm very happy both as to our current notice and very happy as to the project approval language. And so I just wanted to thank staff for being flexible on the matter.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
Not at this point.
Okay. How about any comments from the public?
Director Mayo, you do have one hand raised for Greg Orsini. But before that, I wanted to comment that we received 14 letters of public comment regarding this item that were incorporated in the initial board packet, and 2 letters of public comment that were received prior to Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. deadline and was provided to the board and public in the supplemental packet to this morning. The total number of public comments received on this item was 16 letters, with 2 of the letters expressing concern from Beryl Feldman and Bruce McLaren, 1 letter expressing both concern and support from Bonnie McGregor, and 13 letters expressing support from the project from Redwood Community Action Agency, Ken Hammock and Sherry Newell, Harriet Hill, Lisa Duggan, and John Calkins, Kate McLean, Coastal Conservatory, Bonnie Oliver, Linda Dorflinger, Twyla Sanchez, a Yurok tribal member and McKinleyville resident, Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities, McKinleyville Land Trust, Joyce King, and the Blue Lake Rancheria.
Yes, thank you. And I read all of those and appreciate all those comments. The issue, somewhat unresolved issue for some of the Verwer neighbors, I'm confident that we will address that adequately. And so I just wanted to thank you for that. And we all share those types of concerns, and they will be addressed. Director Couch, if you wanted to proceed with your comments, sir.
Well, Dennis, I was just heading the same thing, that, you know, I really like the overall project tremendously. You know, the people on Terwar do have some valid points, and I think we need to accommodate them. One of the things I was thinking was, you know, since the project started, we acquired the Pia Lorsi project property down below it, so there might be more opportunity, you know, for access from that area that wasn't previously available. But
all righty, well,
I'm gonna vote yes for it.
Yep, thank you. And then if we had Greg Orsini from the public.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Mayo. I would just, of course, have a lot of history with this project and participated in the 20-year facility plan. When we decided that we were going to decommission the percolation ponds, and I think that this is a great project. It's you know, the habitat for offstream habitat for salmonids in the lower reaches of the Mad River are pretty much non-existent. I think this would be a good starting place to address that. It seems to me that the McKinleyville Community Services District is going to have to decommission the ponds, and if we bulldoze them in and plant trees on it, it's going to cost us a minimum of $200,000. If we go ahead with this project, we're enhancing the environment, and it's going to cost us a fraction of that. So I see this as a win-win. I also see the improvements to the bluff. The bluff has been used for years and years and years. Anybody who's lived in McKinleyville for any amount of time at all knows the actual use of the bluff. In fact, it used to get used quite a bit more before the armoring was done, before we started losing the bluff in those few winters. It led up to the armoring of the bluff. So it'll be nice that the community has access to that, or that there's something to do with that area again, since it's not an ideal fishing hole anymore. So I think that those are all positive things. I do hear the concerns of the people that live in that area and have traffic and have concerns about the impact. I think that any of the concerns that they have are easily mitigated, and will be to their satisfaction. And I'm sure MCSD will make sure that they're happy with what goes on there before we move ahead with the project. But anyway, other than that, I'm done talking.
Thank you. At this time, I would entertain a motion on this item.
Mr. Vice Chairman, this is John Corbett. I'd like to move the item as explained in the staff report, and making sure that it includes Resolution 2020-22. I wanted to very briefly say, because there were challenges to whether this was within the proper purposes of the district, and I think it is from quite a few grounds. The first is we're responsible for our sewer, and when it's become obsolete, we're responsible for putting it to bed. And I think that gives us authority to find the best project to do that. This saves the district a lot of money. And in addition, it provides public access. And I do think we have powers to carry out our responsibilities to put up our ponds to bed, really. So I'm extremely enthused about the project, including the coho, which is greatly needed. And I can tell you from my experience on the Klamath that a lot of the coho up in the Scott and Shasta swim unbelievably all the way down to almost the mouth of the Klamath River. And then they turn right off some of the more sedate creeks because they can't stand the current. This is a perfect coho habitat. And so I feel from almost any different angle, this is a very positive project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I have a second?
I will second it.
Thank
And
you.
I'll add too that John forgot that we're creating quite a bit of recreational opportunity, I think. So we do have a recreational function. And so that's another reason to think it's within our purview.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, we can, but you do have a hand raised by Darren.
Oh, okay. I thought that
wanted to let you know about that.
Yep, thank you. I thought we only had one. Darren, if you would, please.
Oh, yes. Well, thanks for having me, and Vice President Mayo and directors. I just want to express my gratitude to your board for this great opportunity for us to partner with you in this project. This has been primarily Mary Burke's activity within CalTrout, but you know, our organization in general really looks for and really values these opportunities to partner with agencies and private landowners to, you know, advance our mission of providing habitat and recovery for salmon and steelhead. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I look forward to taking the project through to the next phase of getting it built. And that's all. Just thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Are you ready for the vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Director Corbett,
Aye.
Director Couch,
Aye.
and Director Mayo.
Yes.
All right.
Great. Thanks, Darren, for hanging out too.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Vice President Couch, Mayo, for running that item. It appears you're in the dark, but you were able to do it. Okay, moving on to item, just making sure we're on item E8. This is on page 205. And consider approval of the location of the solar panels for the microgrid project to be located at the wastewater management facility. And I believe that's going to our general manager.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So as the board is aware, the district is moving forward on a design build project with Ameresco to construct a microgrid to operate our wastewater treatment facility in the event of power outage. So this will consist of a solar panel array as well as battery banks. As part of the design process, we asked Ameresco to put together a high-level siting study to look at alternative locations for the solar panel array. So they just came back with that study, and they basically looked at 6 different locations in and around the wastewater management facility. The first one was the dog park in the tree areas kind of to the north of the dog park, but it was determined, and that was our initial location. We were hoping we could locate these, but it was determined that those trees are coastal resources and the Coastal Commission would never give us a permit. So that alternative location is not feasible. The second location was the dog park in of itself, and moving to the south of those trees into the main part of the dog park area. We would install the solar array there. We would reroute the trail to the south of those. We would still have dog park area, but we would definitely impact the dog park. The third area that they looked at was a floating array located on one of the ponds in the wastewater treatment plant. That had the advantage of being located in a wastewater treatment facility, but the costs were quite a bit higher because there was only one vendor who built those sort of arrays, and their costs were high, and maintenance would also be high. The fourth location was looking at carport style and putting them in the Hiller parking lot. So basically they would be raised up and cars could park underneath them. But that also was not determined to be a viable alternative because we could not get enough solar panels in there. The fifth area was the forested area kind of to the north and east of the wastewater management facility. But again, it was quite a ways away, and the cost to run wire all the way from there down to the wastewater management facility basically eliminated that alternative. And the sixth alternative location was the Pond 5 area. That's an old pond within the wastewater treatment facility that, with the upgrade to the facility, is no longer needed and is no longer being used. Excuse me. So we could use that area. So basically, it came down to three alternatives that we could look at: either the dog park area proper, a floating array within the wastewater management facility, or the Pond 5 area. Ameresco put together costs and ran this through their Homer model, which is basically a way to look at the energy costs and average it over 30 years. The two cheapest alternatives were the dog park area, which had a Homer 30-year net present cost of $1.8 million approximately, and a total installed cost of $1.9 million, almost $2 million. And the Pond 5 area, which has a Homer 30-year net present cost of $2.26 million, or a total system installed cost of $2.8 million. So the Pond 5 area actually is more expensive than the dog park area. The dog park area was the cheapest alternative. It also should be noted that the State Water Resource Control Board is paying for this project with a 50% grant and a 50% loan program. So the cost to the district for the construction of the dog park option is actually 1.9 divided by 2, or $987,000. And the cost of the district for the construction of the Pond 5 option is 2.8 divided by 2, or $1.4 million. And then the district's cost will be covered by a 15-year loan from the Regional Water Quality Control Board at a 1.8% per annum interest rate. So the total additional cost paid by the district for the Pond 5 option is $437,535 plus a principal plus $61,000 in interest. However, given the likely extensive public opposition to locating the solar array in the dog park area and the greater security afforded by having the array located within the wastewater management facility fenced area, it is recommended that the Pond 5 site be chosen and that staff direct Ameresco to move forward on the design for that alternative. So staff recommends the board review the information provided, discuss, take public comment, and approve the Pond 5 site for the solar array to be installed at the district's wastewater management facility. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, President Burke.
Thank you. Well, first I'm going to start. Do our directors have any questions or comments at this time?
Yes, this is John Covert. I have a question to Pat. One of the aspects of this solar project was that it was going to pay for itself plus by providing electricity to the district. Do the numbers still pencil at the higher costs?
Yes, absolutely.
I just thought that ought to be made clear.
Do you want to reiterate a little there, Pat?
Sure. Well, so the way the grant programs work is the levelized cost of energy, the LCOE, has to be better than the do nothing option, or they won't fund the project. So in the table, the do nothing option, if you run it through that Homer model, the levelized cost of electricity comes in, levelized cost of energy, excuse me, comes in as 0.249. So the viable options need to be less than that. And the pond 5 comes in at 0.115 or well less than that, over half of that. So it'll pay for itself, and actually with the pond 5, the average net annual savings systems over 30 years, so the average annual savings is going to be $43,686 for the district. So that's not only saving all the electrical costs, but you'll be saving that much per year with this system.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from the directors?
Oh, I had a kind of a question and a comment. I like the idea of putting it in pond 5, but looking at the diagram on page 214 where it is in pond 5, it's kind of jammed over on the side by the forest. And I would hope they would move it to the other side where it's sunnier.
Yeah, they went through, they do a whole shading study too.
Okay.
So they went through that, and it should get enough sun even jammed over there like that.
Okay.
Would the construction of the panels within the pond 5 impact the future build-out potential for the wastewater treatment plant?
No, so, currently we looked at, as part of the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, the district looked at where all the expansion would occur for additional facilities, and none of them are in the pond 5 areas, so it should not impact future operation or expansion of the wastewater management facility.
And considering environmental feasibility, there's no other constraints with, this would be putting it within our facility where it is fenced and already operating as a waste management facility. So I'm assuming the compliance end of things, is there a cost associated with having to go through a compliance effort if they were to go in the dog park?
Well, so yeah, that's part of the contract as well as doing the final environmental studies, et cetera. As far as environmental studies associated with the dog park, the costs of doing those probably are negligible or similar to looking at it in the pond 5 area. As long as we don't take any trees out or anything like that. We've had conversations already with the Coastal Commission about what they do and don't want to see. So both options are fairly similar in that respect. As far as mitigating for visual impacts to the public use of the dog park area, those would have impacts that we would have to mitigate for, and I'm sure the public would have something to say about it.
Okay. Any other comment or question from the board before I go to public comment? Okay, seeing none, I will turn it to the public and see if there's anyone who would like to speak to this item. Okay, and if you are on the telephone, please unmute yourself. Okay, bringing it back. So
I have a comment, Mary.
yes, please.
So I would like, with a comment, to move staff recommendation on this item. It would be my preference to have the dog park as our siting, but I understand the reasoning for our pond 5, and I'm just very happy that we're at this point. We've been working on this from the day I started at this little venture, MCSD, and it's pretty darn pretty darn good to see this really great project keep coming to light. I'm just really pleased. So again, I move staff recommendation.
I'll second, and I agree with Dennis for the decades it's taken to get this project.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call?
Director Corbett,
Yes.
Director Couch,
Yes.
Director Mayo,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes, and with a final comment that I'm glad you're here, Greg Orsini. I know your work on this was integral to getting it in place, and then just to take a moment and pause and think of the late Director George Wheeler, who was really thrilled to have this moving forward, and I know I miss him greatly.
Could I make a comment, Mary?
Please.
I agree with you completely, and I was remiss in not thanking Mr. Orsini, and I was remiss in not thanking our staff, because our staff has stayed on this like a dog on a bone. Thank you so much.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Okay. Let's see, we did that. Motion second and roll call, right? I can move on to item E9.
Correct.
Okay, item E9. This is the emergency sort of declaration of an item that we did not have time to include in the board packet, but that it is timely and we are considering it here tonight. So this is in addition to the agenda, and I'm turning it over to Pat Kaspari, our general manager.
Okay, and I'm going to thank Greg on the last item too, and getting that all in place and just handing it off to me so I can carry it forward. So moving on to the community forest. So we did hear from Trust for Public Lands, like I had mentioned at the outset last Friday, that we had made it through the second round of funding from the State Natural Resource Agency to provide funding for the purchase of the community forest. Trust for Public Lands, he initially said that, since we've made it through that round, we likely are going to get funded, but he then walked that back and said he didn't want to promise anything that he couldn't deliver on, but it does look pretty good that it will eventually be funded. But the Natural Resource Agency wanted several other documents for this final clearance, one of which is a letter from MCSD committed to accepting the community forest land and committing to operation and maintenance costs. They provided bullet items. This Natural Resource Agency provided bullet items on what it wanted to say. They also said it needed to accept the property with the deed restrictions. They also provided sample deed restriction language that would likely have to be adopted. So I prepared a rough draft of the letter. President Burke reviewed, as well as Recreational Director Frisbee reviewed it and provided comments. Do you want me to read the letter? It was provided in the supplemental board packet. Do you want me to read it or just open it up for discussion?
I think it would be nice for those who haven't heard what's in there, and it's fairly short. So if you wouldn't mind reading it.
Sure. The letter states, this letter confirms McKinleyville Community Services District's acceptance of the proposed community forest land from Diamond and Trust for Public Lands if this grant is funded. A community forest is something that the district and surrounding community have been actively working on for over 20 years. And we are very excited to see the project move forward with your assistance. The district is fully committed to making this a viable community forest that is an asset to McKinleyville and surrounding regions, not only for our lifetimes, but into perpetuity. Towards that end, the district agrees to accept title to the property, portions of APNs, et cetera, accept the property with deed restrictions in general conformance with the attached template provided by the state, and provide for the long-term operation and maintenance of the property in perpetuity, including timber harvest revenue on long-term operation and maintenance of the forest. The district currently operates and maintains over 150 acres of parks and open spaces. We have the necessary resources and experience to plan and successfully operate these types of assets. A community forest is a long-desired community amenity, and the district is committed to do what is needed to develop a forest that will serve our entire community, including ADA users, local tribes, and disadvantaged community members. Thank you for helping our community realize this goal. Sincerely, Mary Burt, President, McKinleyville Community Services District. Do you want me to read the deed restriction language?
If you could summarize, if there are.
So, yeah, so generally it just says that, you know, this property is being provided for the use as a community forest, and you need to use it as a community forest. You can't do development on it. You can't burden the property or any portion thereof as a security for a debt. You can't use it for mitigation without the written permission of the state, and that the burden on the property runs with the land. So fairly straightforward deed restrictions.
A question on the deed restrictions that just occurred to me. If there were a development action that was in alignment with a community forest, let's say a recreational facility, would you think that that would be in alignment with those restrictions?
Yeah, and they do have language in there that, you know, unless approved by the state. So I think something like that, you'd likely have to go back to the state and say, hey, you know, we think this is in conformance with the use of these. Do you agree?
Great. Any questions or comments from the board?
Well, I just think, or yes, not, thank the staff for jumping on this so quickly. That's a nice letter. Appreciate it.
And any other questions or comments from the board? I see I have a hand from Greg Orsini. Go ahead, Greg.
Yes, thank you. And I'll try to minimize the amount of time that I talk. I don't want to make gadfly status on my. But anyway, I think that this is another one of those things that's going to be a total benefit for the community. I'm glad that the stars seem to be aligning, and we're going to be able to get financing for this, or funding, grant funding for this. Also, I think that this also opens up an opportunity for us to leverage some hazard mitigation grant funding for this. I know that Pat had worked on that originally, when we thought that we might be able to actually purchase the property using hazard mitigation grant funding, but I think that there's going to be an opportunity for that too. So I'd like to see the district to move forward once we know that that the property is ours. The only thing that I really had that might be concerned, but I doubt very much that it is, there's some of the restrictions that might fall on that property, and that would be that that we wouldn't be we would still be able to claim carbon credits for the property, because I know that that's going to be very important for the property being financially feasible for us to keep and maintain. So it might be just something to think about or to ask questions about. But I don't think that any of those deed restrictions will limit us from being able to sell carbon credits for the property.
Are you talking about carbon credits?
Yes,
complex answer. The application is as a working community forest, and presumably if you're working it too much, you can't sell the carbon credits. However, the carbon credit system allows for significant periods of times of not harvesting, in other words, a low rotation level. And usually you can set that off to your industrial timber companies such as Green Diamond and look pretty good, and we wouldn't be harvesting that intensely. And it does mean that certain areas we will potentially have to harvest. But overall, it is entirely consistent with this project if we're very careful how we plan to both get carbon credits and get resources off the land as appropriate. And in a way that was specifically discussed in the phone conversation.
Thank you. Any further public comment on this item? If you're on the phone, go ahead and unmute. Okay, seeing nothing further, then I'll bring it back and entertain a vote or a motion.
We approve the letter.
I'll second.
Great. Roll call, please.
Director Corbett,
Yes.
Director Couch,
Yes.
Director Mayo,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes, thank you. So at this time, we are going to move backwards to item E5 on page 102, annual review and discussion of 2019 to 2024 strategic plan, red line staff version. And this is with April, our board secretary.
So the McKinleyville Community Services District strategic plan was adopted September 4th, 2019. As a part of the process, the strategic plan is reviewed by staff and the board annually to reflect continued progress that MCSD makes with projects, finances, and improvement programs. This plan is foundational to the district's long-term financial health and stability, yet provides annual reviews to stay grounded in the current and midterm needs of the community we serve. The strategic plan will continue to be presented to the board annually for approval. Tonight, we encourage the board to review the material and bring any revisions or comments to the meeting for discussion. And staff recommends that the board review the proposed staff revisions to the strategic plan, discuss, make recommendations, take public comment. No action will be taken at this time as this item will return for approval at the October 7th board meeting.
I'm looking to the other directors to see if you have any comments or suggestions.
Madam Chairman, this is John Corbett. I have one suggestion, and that
Yes.
is in the mission statement. And it's gotten dark and I don't have the lights on in this room, so it's hard for me to read, but provide McKinleyville with safe and reliable water, wastewater, lighting, open space, parks and recreation, library services, and other appropriate services. And I would like, after library services, we consider collaborative law enforcement projects. And the goal here is to recognize how much we've grown over the last 5 to 10 years. And I want to make sure that within our purposes, we can subsidize the rent to the sheriff's office, maintain police. So I wanted to at least consider.
So those
I would
words
say,
were, sorry, go ahead.
I would absolutely agree with Mr. Corbett's, or Director Corbett's remarks.
And so those words were added: collaborative law enforcement facilities,
Services.
services.
And again, I want to announce no new taxes are anticipated.
I always thought you were a Bush Republican in hiding.
Any other comments or edits from the board? Pat, would you like to speak to any of the red line or call on staff to speak to any of the red line changes?
Staff very much went through and mainly focused on the impacts of COVID on the schedule, and adjusted the schedule based on hopefully that we're kind of out of this COVID thing by the end of this year, early 2021. So we really focused on just adjusting the due dates as required. I don't know, April, anything you wanted to add?
I think, you know, we tried to make comments regarding that, and every time that the date was changed. So, but yeah, for the most part, it was because of COVID or just inability to start the project due to that.
Okay.
This is John Corbett. I think that's a good idea, but as much as possible, it should be put in the framework of other pandemics. For the our pesticides and herbicides, it was a little controversial, but I put in there emergency provisions in case they should occur. They are not relevant now, but the idea is that when you set your policies, you take into account there may be these types of diseases. And we may have one that's a lot more potent or higher mortality rates. And I just think it's wise to try and get generic language if we can. Thank you.
Any other comments or edits from the directors? Okay, then I'm turn it over to the public. And if you're on the phone, go ahead and unmute. All right, I'll bring it back to the directors. I'll say the one thing that I feel is hard to grasp by just looking at this strategic plan is the breadth of the work that our staff and that the district does every year. And so when you look at the strategic plan, you know, it's noted there in the introduction. If there's any way that, I mean, I didn't come up with any language to add, but I just, if it feels strong enough the way it's written for staff to relate to the amount of work that you all accomplish, that we all accomplish as the community services district, then, you know, I'm completely fine with it. But, you know, these items are what happens after we've gotten the services delivered to the community. And help us, you know, think into the future about what we want to do. But just a thought there. Any other comments from the board? So then this is, you know, staff's looking for any revisions. This is not a roll call, but it sounds like we had 2 board members in favor of the collaborative law enforcement services. And so that'll show up when it comes back to us for approval. Okay, great, thank you. Then with that, I'm going to move on to item E6, page 115. Discussion regarding digital meeting guidelines, procedures, and universal technology elements. Both Pat and April are going to lead us through this item.
And I'll take the lead, and feel free to fill in, April. And I think we're kind of behind the curve on this. When we switch to this format, we're kind of feeling our way through it. And we feel like we should, some of the lessons we've learned, memorialize and put into the board policy manual on how we are handling things like public comment, how, you know, board members should be reacting and participating in this. And one of the other things is we think that, and we would like to get board direction on buying laptops for all the board members, so they all have the same platform working off of. They all have an adequate camera and microphone, and have something that they can be working off of, so these meetings go better. Not that they're not going well, but so we are looking for input from the board on whether we can buy those laptops. I think they would last and serve the purpose not only for these type of meetings, but in the future when we switch to electronic formats, particularly if any board director would rather just look at all the board packet electronically rather than us printing out hard copies for everybody. It would serve in that fashion as well. So we're kind of looking for board direction on two items, whether the board would consider and approve of purchasing 5 laptops to provide to the board members for use as while they are a director. The estimated costs for all of those are, including the software required to protect them, is $2,456.64. And we're also looking for staff direction on having us mark up the board manual with some of these items and bringing it back to the board for their review and approval. So I think I will end there. April, is there anything you want to add?
I think that you got that pretty well. I think the one thing just to note is that when everybody has the same platform, if somebody is having problems with their picture or sound, it makes it easier for staff to address that and help them out. And so that is one of the reasons why we're suggesting that everybody has the same platform instead of everybody having something different. So it would be easier on staff to be able to help you all out when something goes wrong.
Thank you. So let's, and that's all from you two. Turn it over to the board now. Okay, so this item lays out, we're looking at 2 things. One is policy suggestions, and the other is the technology elements. And, you know, I'll hear on either item from board members.
Well, this is John Corbett. I think we definitely need to develop the policies because this is going to be the future, I think, without any doubt. The software on electronic board meetings, I have a couple boards that I'm dealing with that. That's a lot harder than you might think. And they've had a lot of times where 5 of them work and the 6th one doesn't. But if you take it very slow and if you provide the current alternatives, you can work through those problems step by step. And then, you know, when we take a vote, it'll all be done electronically. We may want to still announce it just for the public, but I think it is the future. I think Zoom is first and the other one is where we need to end up, but it takes quite a bit of education, both the staff and board, to make work.
And Director Corbett, you're talking about having the hardware. It takes a lot to get it all operating seamlessly.
No,
and
I'm
the
talking
software.
about actually operating the software programs.
Ah.
I think we can move quickly on the hardware, and I think we can quickly be Zooming at a sophisticated level, but going to all where voting, our agendas and everything's electronic, which is where I think we need to go. That takes a little bit more time, it's my experience. So if people are willing to be patient through longer learning curves, I think that's a wise move to go to. But first, let's get the hardware, let's get Zoom, and then let's lay out a plan on what's the best electronic meeting formats. But they are nifty because you can look up and you can print them up if you want ahead of time. And then you can look at them right there on the screen when people are talking.
Other thoughts?
Yeah. Well, as your technical computer guru, my comment is, I'll go along with the will of the board.
By the way, Dennis, we've invented lights.
Well, I was gonna mention to you, Director Corbett, that after we get the solar array going, you might be able to run a drop cord over there to help you.
Right, there we go. Thank you. Nice to know you care. Nice to know you care.
Okay.
Director Couch, your thoughts on the item?
I think it's a great idea. I have to borrow my wife's laptop to participate, so get me out of that routine.
Could save a marriage, right?
That's right.
A question on the hardware. I think the Arcata City Council uses pads, some sort of digital pad. What was the thinking between using a pad technology and a computer technology?
So we actually anticipated this particular question. So basically, the computer has a few more pros. One of them is, honestly, when it comes to the Zoom platform or even other ones, if we were ever to go to like GoToMeeting or whatever, the operating system that computers use to be able to use that software, it's actually easier. When you have your pad, the iPad or whatever tablet you have a mobile version. And so it's kind of like a dumbed down version. And so it actually is a little bit more difficult. Sometimes people who are using their phone get a black screen and they don't know how to get their video, and then they have to go through a whole lot of other issues. So that's one of the biggest reasons. And then cost-wise, there wasn't really a huge difference in cost. And as far as longevity and of use, the computer will last longer. And the other thing is, if we are to use this longer for something, say, in the future, to have digital agendas and that sort of thing, it's a lot easier to look at it on your computer and be able to store it there. You'll have actually more storage space. So if you have multiple, you want to keep your agendas because you have like a particular project that's going over 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, or months. I mean, you'll have more space to hold it, whereas a tablet you won't have as much space. So we looked at all the specs of all of that and came up with the fact that a computer would be better.
Nice, thank you. Yes, I have a big stack of agenda items from past meetings sitting in my office space. Let's see. So it sounds, we'll have a public comment, also motion and second, but it sounds like people on the board here are generally favorable towards the hardware. How about we discuss a little bit about policy? So some suggested additions. So formalizing. So when we started all this, April and our general manager at the time, Greg Orsini, we sat down and you wrote up a draft of how we would operate in this world of online meetings. That would be great to have that policy in the manual. And it really could help us outline the muting. So making sure that the public is muted, they know they're muted, how do they get their voice heard? But one of the other ideas too is for our own board and sometimes what can happen is, background noise can make it difficult for others to hear. And so we might want to try to lay out a policy that'll help us have the clearest voices that we can, both for in the meeting where there's a lot of inference that you can do, but also for recorded purposes where the audio might not be as clear. And any thoughts there?
Well, this is John Corbett. I had a couple more. One of them is we need to make sure all board members know this is a public record. You're not allowed to destroy the records. The district could get in big trouble over that. Second thing is we may or may not choose to go to the icon, which the individual computers can give permission to staff to get on our computer to actually correct problems. But I would like that only with the permission of the individual user, even though they're public records. So it's sort of a funny policy, but I just don't feel comfortable someone getting on my computer without me knowing and moving stuff around. But it is a public record. And I do think that can really help when board members are struggling. Someone who knows the system can get their permission, get on, and then just run their computer to straighten it out.
So you're saying any notes taken within your board materials, just like someone could do a public records request for any of us directors. It's the same thing with the computer.
Right. But with sort of a backslide that if we have provisions where staff can enter our computer, which they might want, and we might want to help run it, that needs to be done with notice to us.
That's good direction. We have already enacted one item here, the board member, we've enacted a lot of items, but I really like how April put our full names and our titles within the meeting. And then the other idea is, this is, coming from me as your board president, but we do present ourselves here in this format. And so open this up for dialogue. But when we come to a board meeting, we sit at a table and we face the audience. And so just some thoughts about sort of decorum, like how, even though we're in our homes, is there room in a policy for statements of decorum? Thoughts from the other directors?
You mean I can't wear my pajamas to the meeting?
Well, it's the upper half.
Wear pajamas? Oh.
We should be mindful that we are on camera and we are representing our district as a whole, the Community Services District. We are the directors.
Yeah. Actually, I was thinking back to what John was saying. If this is a public record, it'd be really good to have the public record on a computer that belongs to the district, because I'm not sure I like having a public record on a personal computer.
Right.
Good point.
You do have a hand raised from the public, just to let you know.
Yes, thank you. I was just looking to see if there was any further comment on this item. I guess I'll go to the public and then I'll bring it back to the board for final thoughts. So, Greg Orsini. Hi, Greg.
Yes, thank you, President Burke. I would like to expound a little bit on the public decorum and appearance thing, because I have read dialogue and things in the newspaper about the appearance of other boards, not necessarily ours, but other boards and how they appear during the meetings electronically. So I think that's might be something that you might want to follow up on a little bit more. And I do agree with you on that. And also another thing too is that I know that Colleen and I are both using tablets right now and don't seem to have an issue. So I think that there are some tablets that might be viable alternatives. Maybe not the Apple platform, but there are some Windows operating system that are available in tablet form. If that would be something that would be more convenient for the board members to be able to carry around with them or to utilize during the meetings. Some of them actually with styluses, so that you could actually write on the screen. But anyway, those are my comments.
Thank
Speaking
you.
of decorum, it looks like George Washington squinting his eyes behind you.
And, thank you for the information, Greg. And if you could share some of that with April or Pat, that would be great. Both the article and the information about the tablet. My interest in the tablet was simply for the potential easy reading options that I think a tablet might give you more than a computer screen, like the blue light. But I'm good to go with whatever is most useful. And the items that you laid out, April, seem like the computer scores some pretty good points.
Yeah, we did do like a pros and cons of both type of a thing. And cost-wise, there wasn't very much of a difference between either of them.
So I like what's suggested here in the item for example, under the board procedures and actions during a meeting, ensure full board member name associated with the video or phone number. Audio off when not speaking is a really good practice. We get used to our own background noise, but other people hear it and it's distracting. So I think the computer system would help with that. Raising hand to ask a question, I think it's good policy. And I think we also do a really good job of, you all tend to turn to me as president or whoever's sitting as president before speaking. And so I like having it as policy, but I think it's also sort of the chairs or the president's will to set up, how that plays out in practice. It's nice to have the policy to fall back on. And then I do like having some guidance in there or some reminder that our faces here are the face of the district. And that's not just you as a person, but that's you as a director representing our whole staff. So I would encourage the procedures, the policy manual to really reflect what you've already included here. So thank you to the staff for giving us something to tear off of there. Any other guidance from any directors? Okay, then is that good for you, April?
I guess I would ask for a little more clarity. Do you want us to come back with a laptop option and a tablet option to the board?
Oh, let's just see if any directors have a preference. So please go around and state whether you have a preference or not. Corbett?
I like laptop.
Couch?
I like laptops, but I would defer to April and Pat on whatever is best.
And Mayo?
Laptop or pad.
And me, no preference.
Okay.
And anything else?
No, so we'll take a cut at the formal drafting of the board policy manual and bring that back to the board for final review.
Great, thank you. So we have now gotten through all of our new and continued business. And I wanted to welcome our supervisor, who I just saw showed up. Welcome, Supervisor Madrone. And we...
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hi there. So we are moving into our reports, our active committee reports. Starting with Recreation Advisory Committee. Couch?
Well, the main thing from our recreation committee was the BMX track thing that was going to be on the board agenda tonight. And I mentioned the fact that they actually voted to support it. So I reported that. So I think that's it for me for now.
Great, thank you. Area Fund only meets once a year, so did not meet. Redwood Region Economic Development Commission, Mayo.
Nothing to report.
The Senior Center, we know they have not been meeting. The Audit Committee, Corbett.
Nothing to report. Nothing to report.
Employee Negotiations, Couch, Corbett.
We actually had a meeting today for the first time in a while, and we talked about the ramifications of the trailer at Hiller Park and the overtime pay and stuff associated with that. So nothing really to report on it other than that we had the meeting today.
Thank you. The McKinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee, myself and our general manager attended. So the meeting rolls through community safety updates and public comment. The discussion, information, and action items were the MCMAC discussing additional support requests to Humboldt County Board of Supervisors. We discussed that, and it was slated for the August 25th Board of Supervisors agenda. Town Center, we got a report on the status of the Town Center. And we heard again from the airport district and the land use compatibility plan update. They extended the deadline for public comment because of MCMAC. Well, I can't say because, but MCMAC did request an extension of the deadline and it was granted. So that was favorably received. There was an update from MCSD on the Restoration and Trails project, for which the ISMND was just approved, and the community forest, for which we just signed the letter of support. And thank you, Supervisor, for also submitting a letter when we submitted that application. And a quick update on the upcoming election. And
Mary?
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Apologies. I thought I'd share with the board just very briefly that the board did consider the request to provide some financial support to MCMAC. It's actually in the rules of MCMAC that were created in 2014 that the board will provide staffing and other reimbursement costs. It's just never actually been pinned down as to what that means. The board will take that back up after our first quarter report in October or November, and I'm hoping that we'll get support for MCMAC in that way. Additionally, there were 3 members of the MCMAC whose terms were up in August. Those were members appointed by the board as a whole. That included Kevin Dreyer, Kevin Jenkins, and Maya Conrad. And I'm pleased to report that at our meeting yesterday, the board unanimously agreed to reappoint all 3 of them to the MCMAC to continue their service. So just wanted to share that with your board.
Thank you. And then we had a few committee reports from the Trails and Multimodal Transportation, Landscaping Committee, and Homeless Subcommittee. Anything further to add, Pat?
No, I think you did a great job summarizing.
Okay, and thank you for reporting out there, Supervisor Madrone. Anything further to add? Okay.
I just say I think the group is doing incredible work. It's a great group, very diverse, represents the community quite well.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions? Sometimes there's questions from the board on that item.
Well,
Okay.
this, John Corbett, I just wanted to provide a history that the Board of Supervisors originally was going to fund the McMack, and then it went into a dry period for almost 10 years. Then they put it in the budget, and 3 straight years in a row, the planning director took it as a slush fund. So the board dropped it rather than being gone around. But I do think there is a commitment of small sums historically, and that was always anticipated. And so I hope that goes well.
Thank you. Okay, Humboldt Local Area and Local Agency Formation Commission, Couch.
So we didn't have a meeting in this interim. Nothing to report.
Thank you. Environmental Matters Committee.
We did not meet either, so nothing to report.
Oh, sorry, Couch, yes. So then item J is ad hoc committee for community forest. And I get to make a change here that I'm going to replace my participation in this with Director Mayo's. You know, at the last meeting, I just didn't fully consider that I was not going to be on the board. And so I think I selfishly put myself in that spot when, you know, Director Mayo, you're going to be here on the board after the new year, and you've already, you know, shown your interest and involvement in this item. So is it all right with you that I put you on an ad hoc committee with Director Corbett?
Oh, sure. Whatever we need to do, it's fine with me.
Great, thank you. Please make note of that. And into item F2. Oh wait, anything to report that we haven't already reported on the community forest ad hoc committee?
Well, this is John Corbett. Staff is working on a packet to deal with the last level, hopefully approvals by the state. And it's, in one sense, most of it's routine, but all these things take quite a bit of work. And so I wanted to thank Patrick for taking it on. And we're going to be, they in particular want notice to the tribe. So I'm going to try and give what little wisdom I have on that to Pat. And that would be something that first Dennis should be in the loop on, and 2, we hope to have something to put that in the board packet so everybody knows exactly what's happening.
Yes, and knowing that that effort was going on, I shared with Pat Kaspari the outreach that we did through the formal process of AB 52 that goes agency to or government to government tribal outreach, and I'm happy to be consulted on how that process went and how the relationships developed through that process for the Mad River project.
That would be excellent.
Anything else to report on the community forest? Okay, item F2, legislative and regulatory reports. Anything out there? What's happening in legislative session? Dennis, you've usually got something for us.
Oh, there's just so much and yet nothing. You know, it's so frustrating right now. The one thing that I can comment on that we're working really hard on is, and I was successful to get Senator Scott support on the Republican side for Garamundi's bill. That's going to give that 5% dedicated money to special districts coming through the continuing Western water bills, you know, and so we're pretty happy about that. It's not a done deal yet, but that's something I've been working really, really hard on, and not just with Senator Scott, but probably 100 different legislators for the last several months. So anyway, there's lots and lots going on, and yet it's a extra frustrating time.
Hi, Mary. This is John Corbett. I
Okay.
wanted to say the district for a long time has not wanted taxes on water. And the state legislature and governors have wanted some way to ensure that all citizens of California can have high quality water. The budget has been created of significant sums of money, like $100 million, to the State Water Resources Control Board, and they will be not by taxing water, but by direct appropriation from the legislature, starting to improve the water to some of the poorest members in California and some of the poorest districts to make sure that the end product is good, clean, healthy water.
Is there any indication of how that work will be carried out? Will it go to special districts, water providers?
Yes, some of it will go to special districts. They still are formulating the funding formulas, but the state does not want to replicate existing governments for providing water and sewer. What they want to do is make them have adequate resources to do the job that the regulations require.
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
John, thanks for bringing that up. You know, we've worked on that tirelessly for the last many years on the state level. Part of that effort has to do with consolidations, the structure, the legal structure of how things can be done through different boundary lines, et cetera. So there's a lot of those technical things that are being worked out. Then you'd be really surprised to know that a lot of getting this good water places is as much technical as it is infrastructure. So those things are getting worked on. And anyway, thanks, John, for bringing that back up.
Okay,
I was
moving
just-
on. Oh, go ahead.
I was reading about that. So with the consolidation is there are districts or agencies that are non-performing. So one of the things is to consolidate them with performing districts or agencies. So that will be happening in the future.
Well, this provides money for that. And of course, that's a little bit more controversy, but it also provides money for solving the problems without necessarily forcing consolidations. But it also gives money to entice people into consolidations, but it's a little more of an emphasis, not on forced consolidations, but on finding ways to improve the water.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on to item F3, staff reports. We'll start with our Finance Director, Colleen Trask. You're on mute. There we go.
There we go. That's better. Anyway, a couple brief things just to highlight in the report. One is that the on-site audit visit was actually done remotely, and Infinite Consulting, our IT system support, was able to set up secure access to all the necessary drives and software programs for the auditors from FEDAC and Brown. All the documentation from the initial sample request was provided for review. Audit confirmations are going out. So that's all on track as hoped for. The other thing that is going to impact that audit, however, is that the county, I've been in touch with the county auditor controller's office. I reported to the board last month that there was some delay in posting the interest apportionment through April 2020. I found out recently that that interest had not been applied to the Quimby funds, and also that the June 30th tax allocation has not yet been posted. The original estimate, I talked to the Auditor's Controller's Office in July, and they said, yeah, we should probably have it done in mid-August. I emailed them back in mid-August, and they basically said, it won't be posted for several weeks yet due to a variety of reasons. So I'm trying to keep tabs on that. I'll make sure the auditors are informed, but you know, there's only so much I can do with that. They said they're making every effort to catch up, and I believe that, but this is likely to be an issue. The other thing, we are keeping tabs on the lock list. We're starting to see more and more, you know, a few more people on the lock list by the end, because some people have figured out that we are not actually able to lock. And if they ask, we tell them that because it's the governor's order. But we are seeing higher total balances in the water bills because of the higher summertime usage. And we are also seeing more people who are not paying their bills. And we can't lock them for non-payment. So we are going to see some impact. I don't necessarily know that it's going to be high enough to tip any of the budget lines over the threshold, but I just wanted to keep the board apprised of that particular situation. The other thing we're doing in the front office is we are in the process of making sure we can set up for employees to work from home during a quarantine situation. If one of us goes out to get tested for COVID-19, we need to be able to make sure that everyone who, you know, if that test is positive, to make sure that everyone is able to keep working, keep the billing going, keep the office running, make sure that the customers get their phone calls answered, their payments in, service orders run, etc., while we are quarantined. So we're working on that, and I just wanted to give you guys the update. And that's it, unless there's questions.
Hi, Colleen. This is John Corbett. You know, there's a recent report in the newspaper that various audited funds were not balanced out at the end of the year, maybe related to the same staffing issues you're dealing with. That does need to be watched. I had lobbied very hard with the county to prevent that 35 years ago. It took me 5 years, and then we reformed the system, and here it is 20 years later, we're looking like we're back in the same problems. But some of those funds, and the newspaper account was a little inadequate to form judgments on. But in the past, some of those funds are funds that you can't let go to zero balance, which means they got to get that money back somewhere. And so I would just, that's being played out at a bigger level than us. No sense to follow it closely, but I would at least take a look at that, make sure those problems are cleared up. The county has expressed optimism they can do it. I hope they're right. But that has been a structural weakness in the county finances, that the computer, when it runs short in one area, grabs the funds. That may not be appropriate in all circumstances. So anyway, if you could just watch that. I realize you got a lot of balls you're juggling in the air. There's one more, but you don't got to do a lot of work on it. Just follow what the reports say.
Right. And thank you for that update. I hadn't, I know that they've had structural problems within in the past, and I was hoping that with some of the changes they've put in the last couple of years or so, that that would hopefully be different, but
we're on about their 5th set of changes to cure the problem.
Right. Well, at least they're still trying. But yeah, thank you for that. I'll look that up and keep a pulse on that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, thank you. Moving on to our Operations Director, James Henry report.
further to add at this time. Thank you.
In case no one could hear that, that was a nothing further to add. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay.
What have we
moving-
done to the man? He used to boom out, nothing to report.
I think it's a technological issue.
Yeah, I was far away from my computer. Sorry. Is this better? Nothing bad.
There you go. Okay, turning to our Recreation Director, Leslie Frisbee, Parks and Rec.
I have nothing further to add at this time.
Thank you. And last but not least, our General Manager, Pat Kaspari.
And I have nothing to add unless the board has questions.
Okay, and I don't hear any questions. So then we're going to move to President's Report. And I don't have anything to report. I'll cede a little bit of my time to our supervisor if there's anything you wanted to update us on. Supervisor Madrone?
No, nothing to report.
Oh, we just lost your audio.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There, yeah.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to thank your General Manager, Pat, and you, Madam President, for meeting monthly. This came out of concerns that Director Mayo had expressed earlier about staying in touch with each other. And this is one of the ways we're doing that. And I very much appreciate those monthly meetings where we get a chance to touch bases. And then Maya Conrad, as the chair of MCMAC, is also in those meetings. So thank you for taking the time to do that. That's really all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies, I missed the last one. But I also really agree that that increased level of communication is helpful in all directions, especially with the great deal of effort Ms. Conrad is going through to bring really robust items to MCMAC and keep our community really well informed. So thanks for setting those up. Board member comments, announcements, reports, and agenda item requests.
Well, this is John Corbett. I want to congratulate everyone on how much we got done at this meeting. Moving forward on the solar project, like I said, I think there's almost 20 years of investment in that. And it's going to help defer our costs. It's gotten more advanced since we around and beyond just paying some of our electricity. We had the Coho project, and we're following up on a really sophisticated analysis of our pipes to make sure that they're kept in order. And that's been a long-term thing. So and we looked at some things on the strategic plan. So I just want to tell everybody, we're really moving, and it was a great meeting, and we should remember the good days, and this is one of them.
Great summary. Thank you, Director Corbett. Anything else? All right. Then I move to adjourn our meeting. Thank you all. Thank you, staff, our general manager. Thanks for being here, Supervisor Madrone, and members of the public. See you next month.
All right.
Thank you all.
Yep. Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.